Hey everybody, you are listening and watching the We Are Rizin podcast, Bloodsport edition. I'm your host, Andrew Benjamin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jay Christian Gary from Focus Fights.
Hey y'all, how's it going?
With us, we have Grizzly Kal Jak. Jak will be taking on Erik Hammer at Josh Barnett's Bloodsport on October 11th. He's a former wrestler for WWE and is an NCAA All-American from Oregon State U. Go Beavers, standing at 6'6", 285 pounds. We have Grizzly Kal Jak. Thank you so much for talking to us. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
First question is, I got to ask, pandemic hit, what have you been doing during your time in lockdown, quarantine, whatever you want to call it?
Oh, I've been going crazy. It is the worst where I live in California because everything is closed off. I had a pretty decent, busy summer with shows and I substitute teach, so I was going to teach quite a bit. And then when the pandemic hit, nothing. So I've been trying to stay as sane as possible, but it wasn't easy. This pandemic has been rough on me, a lot of the guys that I know in California. So the opportunity to do Bloodsport is the best thing on the planet for me right now.
Actually, expanding upon that, one of the things that's been affected is gyms, places just where you can just train. I'm curious to know, has the places where you were training at, were they at all affected? Did you have to go start training at home or something like that?
Well, it's funny because the high school that I helped coach and teach at, I had weight room keys, and I would go there and work out and lift during the pandemic. One of my athletes that I coach, he's going to college for wrestling on a full ride scholarship. And I'm like, hey, Chris, here are the weight room keys. Just you, pal. Don't have anyone else going there. Just you get your own workouts in because you're going to college and you're going to be wrestling. He got them taken away from the head football coach. So that was a big crush to me, because then it's like, well, great, now I don't have a place to work out. A lot of home gym workouts. I actually got into doing Gdp Yoga quite a bit just to do something. But, it's been a long 6-7 months with not a lot of consistent working out. But now that things have lightened up quite a bit, gyms have opened up where I live. So in the past month, so I've been able to do quite a bit since to get ready for Bloodsport. But yeah, this pandemic, not a whole lot, man. It's been rough.
So just tell us, what are your thoughts on Gdp Yoga? I know that people love it.
It helps a lot with flexibility. Recovery, I don't know if it's a good tool for recovery. A lot of people say it is. I think it helps for flexibility and balance. Those are the two things that I get from it. A lot of people, when I was in developmental for WWE, we had mandatory yoga classes for recovery for the guys that were performing and doing shows. I mean, I think it's all preference. If it helps with recovery, I think it most importantly helps with balance and flexibility, which are two things you really do need to be a pro wrestler. So yeah, I think it works in a lot of ways.
Actually, I just want to briefly touch on when you're in developmental. Now, as I mentioned before in the intro, you were at Oregon State, part of the Beavers, Oregon State Beavers wrestling team. Curious to know, was the training when you were doing it at OSU, was that harder or was that easier or on par of what they were doing when you're at developmental?
Nothing is harder than college wrestling. I don't care what anyone says. Nothing is harder than college wrestling. It's a whole different level. And I had Jim Zaleski as a coach kind of right when he had a big chip on his shoulder when he got let go from Iowa. Mm-hmm. So those weren't fun few years with Jim. He was a pretty intense guy. So nothing, I mean, sheesh, you asked me to go run 5 miles and then go run up Research Stadium 10, 12 times and then go wrestle 3 hours later. We did nothing like that in developmental. But I mean, don't get me wrong, developmental, it's hard. It can be hard, but nothing competes with college wrestling. No way.
Mm-hmm. Also, just speaking of your time at OSU.
Now, to touch up on that particular, Andrew, I'm sorry to interrupt, even though it's kind of my thing, but to touch up on that question, when it came to running the steps up and down the football stadium at Oregon State, did you ever feel like, maybe if I could have picked a different sport, maybe if I could have been involved in college football, I wouldn't have to run up I wouldn't have to run up these stadium steps as much as often?
I definitely considered it for sure. I just feel like my first love was wrestling, and despite whatever training or things I had to go through, that wasn't going to change. I was always going to wrestle. Even if I was a good football player in high school, I just felt like wrestling was more my avenue.
I see. Andrew, you can continue now.
Oh, yes. I was going to just ask one of my last questions about being at OSU. You were on the team I think you're on the team with Colby Covington. Is that correct?
Yes, I was.
What was it like being on the same wrestling team as him? I know, Christian, sorry, you're not a fan of Colby Covington. Forgetting about all the stuff he said.
Yeah, I have my thoughts about Colby Covington. I just don't want to display them on this out of respect.
Just curious to know, what was it just like being with him on the same team? I mean, I don't know. Obviously, it was different Colby. I'm assuming different Colby Covington then than now. But like, just do you have any? Can you have anything you could tell us that you remember about him?
Oh, I remember a whole lot about Colby. It's funny because I was at one of his first fights when I was training in developmental in Florida. I got to watch him fight. I mean, it was an okay fight. He's not the guy he was in college that he is now. I think, he did some time with Impact. So I think he really embraced the idea of having a character, having a persona that people can either hate or love. I think he's more on the receiving end of the hate, but that's just what he's doing, man. And he's getting attention. Is it the right kind of attention? I don't know. In college, he was a really intense guy. That's for sure. I see more of his character when he's firing up in like the interviews after the fights. Like if you go watch his interview with Kamaru Usman came on and talked to him after his fight with Tyron Woodley. That's kind of the more Colby Covington. That's the real Colby Covington to me, is more intense, saying curse words and stuff. Because we hung out, we've partied. He was roommates with one of my best friends in college, so I know Colby really, really well. He's an intense guy, and that's his personality. And yeah, he was a cardio machine. Like, I feel like maybe because here's the thing, Colby was at Iowa, and then he had a really funky situation when he was at Iowa, and then he ended up going, I think, grades or something. Then he went to Iowa Central, wrestled at Iowa Central, the junior college, and then he transferred to Oregon State his junior and senior year. So I was only on the team with him for 2 years, but that's enough to really get to know somebody, especially with like the grind and stuff that we went through in college. But yeah, I can say he's an intense guy. I mean, is it a persona? I think he kind of worked himself into a shoot with the whole, MAGA stuff and all that, Trump and whatever. So it's interesting how that all worked out. But like I said, he was on Impact. I think that's where he really started noticing that having a character, having something for people to attach to, that's where things picked up. So
now let's talk about your wrestling persona, the Grizzly Kal Jak. What's interesting is that even though you do have a persona, so whenever there's these wrestlers that have like a persona, they kind of wrestle to that persona, but you don't really do that. You kind of still do. I see you incorporate stuff from I see you incorporate double leg takedowns, single leg takedowns. It's almost, but yet you're not like wrestling, I guess, like a Grizzly, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? You know how like there'd be like a lot of old time wrestlers, they go by like something, kind of wrestle with their name, the gimmick is, but you don't do that. And I kind of find that a little bit interesting.
I think it depends.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm not character or anything. I'm just more or less myself. But like if you had me cut a promo, or if you put me in an angle and there's this, like, for instance, I don't think I'm going to be super Grizzly Kal Jak wrestling Erik Hammer. This is more of a shoot style match. You're going to get more of what I was in college and pre-pro wrestling, which I'm kind of excited for. But I think it just depends on the company and the scenario. It's more of a moniker with the whole Grizzly Kal Jak. I call myself the Grizzly Grappler, so that's part of the gimmick too. I just think it depends, man. I mean, with my style, if I keep pressure on somebody, I do maul them like a bear in a sense. So I guess it depends, whatever kind of matches you see. But yeah, I do implement a lot of my amateur stuff in pro wrestling because not a lot of guys do that. I mean, guys do a catch style wrestling, but I don't see a lot of guys that really do a pure amateur based style wrestling. I mean, there's a handful that do, but not too many. I mean, I had a conversation with a trainer last year about how you can do amateur style wrestling and pro wrestling, but you got to make it to where it's not boring. Because a lot of people think it's really, if it's all you're doing is just that type of wrestling, it doesn't catch the eye as much as, some people might think it will. So you kind of have to adjust, So yeah, the character Grizzly Kal Jak, I mean, it's all preference. I don't really know if my character fits my pro wrestling style, if it does or doesn't. I mean, it's up to interpretation.
Actually, speaking of up to interpretation, and last year we asked when we were interviewing for the wrestlers for Bloodsport, it came out. Trying to remember the wrestler who said it, Christian. What was the name of the Impact wrestler who the woman's knockouts who said
Jordan Grace. Jordan Grace.
Yeah, well, Jordan Grace had she put out a post on Twitter saying that she considered wrestling more of an art than a sport. And so I just want to get your thoughts on what you consider pro wrestling. Not necessarily to agree or disagree with her, but what do you consider it? Do you consider it sport? Do you consider it art? Is it a little amalgamation of both? What are your thoughts overall?
I think it's all preference. For example, Bloodsport is more as a sporting event. When someone like Jordan Grace, who's on TV on Impact, maybe she sees it more as an art because she's on TV, she's acting, pre and post match with promos and monologues. I mean, in a sense, we are doing theater. And I've told people what does pro wrestling mean? I say, yeah, it's like theatrical fighting. Theater is an art, but fighting is a sport. So I wouldn't say it's sports entertainment. That's WWE. But if you want to be, I think pro wrestling is a competition. Yes, the outcome may be predetermined, but at the same time, things change in a match where it can be more of a sport. So I think it's more preference. That's just how I feel. I read in the sense, and this is something that someone told me a long time ago. Pro wrestling is an opinion. There's no facts in pro wrestling. It's all an opinion. Some people have a different opinion about it. Some people like it. Some people don't. Some people hate it. Some people love it. It's all an opinion. For opinion, it's an art. It's an art. My opinion, it's more of a competition sporting event than it is, because a lot of people get into pro wrestling. They just want to do it because they think it's fun. I heard an interview with a wrestler, and he said, you do this to be the best. And if you're treating this to be the best, then it is a competition. That's kind of what I think.
It's so funny because that's the complete polar. When we talked to Erik Cameron last year, when we brought up that question, he was offended that he was actually considered an art. So you're being a lot more diplomatic than he was. So speaking of Erik Cameron, let's talk about your match at Bloodsport. First time in Bloodsport you'll be competing in. What are your thoughts when you got the call or the text or whatever that be part of this? It's kind of a unique family to be invited to a Bloodsport show.
Bloodsport was when I got into after developmental with WWE. When I got let go, I saw Bloodsport and I just said, this is the one thing I want to do more than anything. I don't care about any of the super big indie shows. I think Bloodsport was the top of my list because I love the concept of it. There's no ropes. It's more submission, grappling base. There's knockouts. You can tap somebody out. You don't have to worry about the guy jumping off the rope or hitting the ropes or any of that nonsense. It's pure grappling, submission, wrestling. It's a shoot fight. I love it. I'm super excited because this is something right up my alley, and having Bloodsport be a platform for me to kind of show what I can really do instead of just kind of fiddling around in these NorCal shows. To me, it's just a huge opportunity. And taking on a guy like Erik Hammer, who's done a lot of Bloodsports, and he's one of Barnett's guys. So to me, it's a test to see how well I can hang with someone who's done a lot of Bloodsport shows. Last year, he took on one of my good friends, JR Kratos. I asked Kratos for advice on how to take on someone like Erik Hammer. He just, hey man, just go out there and do your best. It really doesn't matter how you think you're going to do or not, because this is up your alley. There should be no reason why you don't do great. And, you know, that's something I always appreciate what he said.
Will this be your first pro wrestling match since the pandemic, or have you wrestled? Yep. Oh, okay.
Yep. It's been my last match, I think, was like March 6th. So yeah, it's been like 7 months since I've had a match. So this, to me, it's like, it's funny because this to me is like the biggest show I've done. I've done some big stuff, but this show to me is like, for me personally, this is like the one I've always wanted to do. And it's just funny that instead of like, a lot of people have momentum with shows. They do one show, they do another show, they do another show. Me, I just did a show, and then boom, I get to do the biggest show I've always wanted to do. And I've had to wait 7 months. So it's kind of, I don't know what word I want to use for it, but it's crazy. So it's interesting.
And
it's you can basically say it's amazing, Carl.
I agree. It is amazing.
And so just give us.
But you know, speaking of which,
sorry, Christian, go ahead.
I mean, I'm gonna let you finish with the rest of your questions in a little bit. But speaking of which, considering the fact that you're gonna be wrestling on this particular type of show for the first time, I just gotta ask, going back to your developmental training with the WWE, how different do you think, you know, it is to wrestle a style that the WWE wants you to wrestle under rather than the style you want to wrestle under or that you're currently wrestling under?
You know, that's a good question, because when I first came to developmental, I had no experience in the ring or pro wrestling whatsoever. So the whole time trying to learn what they want to do, I start out learning their style. I didn't just go, you know, it's funny because when you take a guy who was in amateur wrestling and you put him in that type of platform, they try to like erase everything you learned from being an amateur wrestling, like don't bend over, stand up straight, show personality, show charisma, show your emotions. You want to project yourself. You don't. It's all how your presentation's the biggest thing that they do in WWE. So that was something that I had to learn going there. And unfortunately, I had a nasty shoulder injury that, you know, I had 2 surgeries and I ended up getting let go because of it. It was almost like, okay, well, now I'm in the independent scene. I don't have all this pressure from a coach telling me I have to do these things. Now I can kind of reinvent myself and really learn what it means to be a pro wrestler on the independent circuit. And that to me kind of, like Jordan Grace said, is an art. This part I think is an art, because now you can really show what you can do as a performer, that in an artistic way that allows you to have freedom and you can represent yourself in any kind of way. So in WWE, yes, you're monitored a lot because you have to be, because it's a TV show. They want to see what kind of character you have that they could write for. If they can't write for you, then there's no use for you. So I think with the Bloodsport style, it fits me more than I think the WWE style, for sure.
Oh, right. Of course. And when it comes down to, you know, how you were going through the WWE, was there any little piece of advice, or was there any little tidbit that, you know, stuck with you or have been sticking with you since leaving the WWE?
You know, there was so many great coaches and trainers, and it's just kind of unfortunate that I was in developmental when we were at FCW for 6 months. And I mean, we had Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, we had Steve Kern, who was Skinner. We had a bunch of really good coaches. Lance Storm came in for a couple weeks. I think Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was my longest coach when we were in FCW for like 2 months. And I think and then like also like Norman Smiley was, I think Norman and Dragon are the two that to me that I kind of connected with the most, especially Norman, because Norman is such a purist when it comes to pro wrestling. I mean, he's been all over the world. He lived in Mexico. He's toured in Europe. He knows how to grapple
But
better.
people only know him. But
Oh,
unfortunately, people only know him here in the States as Screaming Norman Smiley and the Big Wiggle instead of all his.
But I mean, he has such a his catalog besides what he did in WCW, so much more extensive than that, and he's talked about it. He's like, yeah, Big Wiggle. None of my technique or anything was utilized, but
But that still doesn't mean that he was probably one of the most underrated technical wrestlers of all time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. But the one advice that sticks with me the most is Steve Kern, who was Skinner, who was I don't think he was the head coach, but he was one of the main people in FCW. And I just remember my first time being there, he talked about how important it is to communicate with whoever you're working. And there's a dialogue you can have with somebody to where if something bad happens in the match, you could talk to that person to where you're not pointing fingers and you're not talking shit. You can respect each other, and if something bad happens, you can come up to the guy and say, hey man, something we had a miscommunication. I think we want to do this, but something else happened. Maybe it was me. I don't know. That always just stuck with me because you're protecting your opponent when you're working, and you protect your opponent to protect yourself. So that's something that always stuck with what Steve Kern told me at FCW. So you don't injure anyone.
I see.
Yeah.
Andrew, can you continue?
Oh, yes. Actually, before I go back to the Bloodsport questions, just quickly about the FCW developmental. Did you happen to also, I know he unfortunately was just released from WWE after so many years, Gerald Briscoe. Did you, were you under, I know he scouted talent up until perhaps like the last day that he was there, I think. Did he scout you when he was,
Yeah, Jerry, I met Jerry when I was a sophomore in college. He came to my Pac-12s tournament. Just my coach, one of my college coaches, is a huge WWE fan, and he recognized Jerry from when Jerry was, working there. And he came up. He's like, "Hey, I'm, so and so. Who are you looking at?" And he was looking at two other guys instead of me that were senior, because Jerry only talks to guys that are like seniors in college, and then he recruits them to do tryouts and stuff. And the two guys that he were talking to, one was like huge big guy, the other one was just a good athlete that won the tournament. Both weren't really that interested in the trying out, but my college coach was like, "Hey, would you ever want to do something like this?" And I said, "I would love to." I wasn't a super big fan of pro wrestling, but that was an avenue I always thought would be really fun to do, and talk to Jerry, introduce myself. He said, "Hey, in a couple of years, maybe just stay on the course of this and then finish out, get your college degree. Maybe we can try out and see if you like to do WWE." And I just, ever since then, just kind of always kept that in the back of my head, like, hey, that's the avenue I can go down on. And end up my senior year All-American and tried out. And Jerry was kind of the guy who orchestrated that. Jerry, like, as far as dudes that I knew Jerry recruited and got a look, it's like you have me, you have Tucker Knight, you have Otis, you have Angelo Dawkins. I think Steve Cutler might have been one of the guys. And also like Chad Gable, for instance. So those are all guys that Jerry was able to bring up and get involved with WWE.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about Bloodsport. Erik Hammer, as we talk about. Are you familiar with him at all? I mean, you said you did talk to JR Kratos. Have you seen? He's an interesting guy because he wrestled only in Japan for maybe a short amount of time, quit pro wrestling, then came back only for Bloodsport. So it's a very interesting career that he's had. Were you familiar at all with him before this match was booked?
Are you talking about Erik Hammer?
Yes, Erik Hammer.
I wasn't totally familiar with Erik Hammer, but we do run in very similar circles. There's a lot of people that I know from like the MMA community that knows Erik Hammer, and there's a few people that I know from the pro wrestling community that knows Erik Hammer. I mean, he trains a lot of MMA guys. He's a no-gi champion. He you know, you can find his stuff on YouTube. I watched a little bit of it. It's funny, my dad actually looked up stuff on Erik to just be like, hey, this guy did this and this, you know, and blah, blah, blah. So I know not a lot about him, but I know enough. I've watched some of his stuff, and like, he's an impressive guy, and we're not too different in size. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to pan out between him and I. So I know Erik Hammer, you know, I mean, I think he's one of Barnett's dudes, so that makes things really interesting.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask your impressions of him, and it sounds like you do have respect for him, and you know that you do. I'm kind of just curious to know, like, how do you prepare also for a guy who's only had one match in the last since the last match I think was last year for Bloodsport. I mean, like, how do you prepare for somebody just who is there's very little recent stuff of him that to look at and see, like, okay, I see he can do that, he can't do that. Can you talk about that?
You know, I don't really have an opinion on that because I haven't wrestled in 7-8 months. So him and I aren't too different from the last time we've had matches. You know, hey, for some people, this pro wrestling's like riding a bike, man. You can't really forget. And I think he stays consistent. I think he trains a lot. Obviously, he's in great shape. He stays in, you know, awesome shape. I mean, this is more his style. This is something that he prefers to do. He's done stuff in Japan. He's done quite a bit. I mean, he doesn't really need to do a lot of matches, you know, with what he's done. So, I mean, really, I don't think there is a way to train for that. I think it's just, you know, really you can't think too much about what your opponent's going to do. You have to think more or less what you're going to do. Because if you think about what he's going to do, then you're not focusing on the right things.
I got it.
So me personally, it's like, you know, I'm more or less thinking about the things that I need to do to get ready for this match. He can, you know, Erik Hammer, he can do whatever he wants. You know, like I said, I definitely respect him. Like, he's been around for quite a bit. And, you know, if he doesn't need to do a lot of matches, you know, to me, it's like, I've told people this, where you can do a bunch of these little itty bitty indie shows and you might not get a whole lot out of it, or you can do a couple really big shows and you get tons out of it. So that's kind of how I feel about it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now, with your first Bloodsport match, what would you like to do to make to put your stamp on your debut? Do you want to finish with a
basically what he's trying to ask is, what would you probably like to do in your first Bloodsport match to make that good first impression?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of really talented guys on this Bloodsport. I mean, last year's Bloodsport, man, you had names after names after names. I don't know if this Bloodsport has that same kind of star power, but I do know there's a lot of big guys in this Bloodsport. So for me, it's, you know, it's given that platform, that opportunity to really show what I can do. You know, I've never had the chance to wrestle on the FITE app or FITE TV. So if I do well, I mean, some people know who I am from developmental and all that stuff. Some people know me from, I do the podcast show Going in Raw. You know, really, I just want to have a great performance. I just want to come out better than coming into it. And I just want to demonstrate what I can do as a pro wrestler more than anything. And if I turn some heads, great. If I don't, then that just gives me something to work on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We have a question from
well, to be fair, the only big name that's on this card so far is John Moxley, and everybody else, they have a name on the independent ranks. Your Killer Kelly's, your Baby Boy Smith Jr.'s, names like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a question from a listener, Gentleman's Combat at Gentleman's Comba. This will be an interesting question, and I'm interested to hear your answer, and so is he. He wants to know exactly how much Volcon have you been watching to prepare for the match? If the answer isn't all I've been doing is watching Volcon matches and training, I'm going to be disappointed.
All the Volcon matches.
Actually, so I'm curious to know, did you ever watch Volcon? For those that don't know, he was a mainstay for companies like Rings, UWF, really maybe one of the first non-Japanese like mixed combat guys who did pro wrestling and MMA. So I'm curious to know, did you ever watch?
Basically, Volkan was Fedor Emelianenko before Fedor Emelianenko became a household name.
Were you a fan? Did you ever watch UWFI or Rings or Pride or anything like those promotions, Jock?
I watched quite a bit of Pride, just because I'm a huge MMA guy, so I would watch quite a bit of Pride. I love watching. Fedor was really great back when in his prime, but to be honest, the guy who I watch more than anything is Gary Albright, because Gary Albright used to train with my dad in the 1984 Olympics. So my dad actually was really good buddies with Gary Albright, because my dad wrestled in college and amateur, and they both trained with each other for Greco-Roman. So that was a guy that I really enjoyed to watch, was Gary Albright. And it's funny, when I was in developmental, one of the guys that used to work there was Rob Naylor. And Rob Naylor came up to me. He goes, "Hey, are you familiar with Gary Albright?" And at the time, I wasn't too sure. And then I texted my dad, like, "Hey, do you know who Gary Albright is? He wrestled at Nebraska. He's this Montana guy." My dad's like, "I know Gary Albright," and just gave me a whole bunch. And it was Gary Albright. It was Dr. Death Steve Williams, who my singlet is kind of based on his singlet that he used to wear. Is him. So those are the two guys that I would watch quite a bit, and also Terry Bam Bam Gordy. But yeah, definitely a lot of Gary Albright.
So with this match at Bloodsport, what is your ideal finish? Do you want to knock out Erik Hammer? Do you want to submit him? What would be your ideal way to finish him off?
If I could get so here's the thing that I've noticed from watching a lot of the Bloodsport matches. A lot of the guys do a lot of similar submissions. They do the arm bars, they do the rear naked chokes, they do sleeper holds. Me, I want to kind of utilize, I would love to hit them in a submission that I used to do. I used to pin guys in college with it. I'm not going to say what it is, because I want to be able to do it at Bloodsport. So that would be really cool, because I want to do something different that a lot of the other guys haven't seen. But to get a knockout with my finisher, that would be amazing too. I'll take either or. More or less, I just want to show something that maybe not a lot of people have seen before, especially with a guy my size. And I know I can move for how big I am. So more or less, it doesn't really matter what the finish is. It'd be great just to get my arm raised, and that's the goal, is just to get my arm raised no matter what, submission or not.
Speaking of submissions, I saw on your social media you're training in jiu-jitsu now.
I did a little jiu-jitsu.
So is this your first time ever training in jiu-jitsu?
No. This is a cool story. When I was in college, it was me wrestling Chael Sonnen, wrestling, Matt Lindland. Those two were ganging up on me when I was in college once. So I'd wrestle Chael, we'd do a little jiu-jitsu. Boom, Chael would tag out, Matt Lindland would come in, Matt Lindland would try to wrestle with me, they would tag out, then Chael would come in. I was getting rotated on by those two. And I held my own I was, at the time, when I was a college athlete, I could manhandle both of them, especially Lindland. And so I'm pretty familiar with it. And then I used to go to Team Alpha Male in Sacramento and do jiu-jitsu with the guys over there, like Uriah Faber. I mean, those guys are little, but I would do practices and training with them, Cody Garbrandt, TJ Dillashaw. So some pretty big names in MMA. So yeah, I know quite a bit. I'm not a submission specialist, but I can get out of holds pretty well.
I was going to say, because I was watching the video and you're wearing a gi, I'm trying to guess what gi would actually fit somebody of your size. That got to be like an A5 or an A6?
Pardon?
Is that an A5 or an A6 gi? Just because I can't figure out what size.
Oh, that was my dad's judo gi that I was wearing.
Oh, okay. That explains that. Okay.
Yeah, it's my dad's judo gi.
Oh, okay. Have you trained judo as well at any point?
Yes, I've done that too. You name it, I've done. The only thing I haven't really done is striking. I've done a little bit, but not a whole lot to say I'd be any good at it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've done judo, jiu-jitsu, Greco, freestyle. So pretty familiar with grappling.
What would you ever consider going into MMA or maybe even professional grappling, which seems to be like a if you had like a few more years to get up on the field, maybe a submission underground, which is run by Chael Sonnen, or does that at all interest you? Or
I actually was gonna do a submission underground. One of Chael's buddies called me out, and I thought we were gonna go do it, and Chael and I talked about it on the phone, but it just kind of fell through. I would love to do submission underground. It'd be really fun. It more or less, it would just have to be me taking on whoever. Hopefully, tire them out, but that would be a fun avenue to go on. I mean, we'll see, because after Bloodsport, I'm moving to Las Vegas, and I told Chael on the phone, hey, when I move to Vegas, if you can give me a chance to, go find an MMA gym that you're familiar with or whatever, and tell them, hey, you have an All-American wrestler who wants to come in and do some grappling to work with whoever's there, just let them know, and I'm totally down to be there. So there's definitely been some talks.
Okay, so are you? I don't know if you want to say it now, but are you considering going to MMA potentially, or
No, I feel like I just want to focus on pro wrestling right now, because it's been the main thing I've been focusing and been doing since 2013. And right now I'm 31. I feel like I'm a little past my time to enter in that avenue, but everyone's different. I feel like for me right now, I think pro wrestling is just kind of what I want.
I was gonna say, somebody told Daniel Cormier, "Listen, you're too old to be going to MMA." We wouldn't have a former world heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier,
Sure.
or Randy Couture, who won, I think, at 41. Christian, didn't Randy Couture win the heavyweight championship at 41?
Yeah, I think he was 41.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was 41, man.
He defended at 44 when I think he beat Tim Sylvia.
Yes.
So.
And so, with your Bloodsport match, what do you hope that fans who maybe are seeing Bloodsport for the first time, or you for the first time, what do you hope that they get out of seeing with your Bloodsport match?
More or less, it would be great just to be like, oh shit, who the fuck's this guy? Oh, is this Cal fucking Bishop from developmental? Oh wow, he looks totally different. He looks like he's gotten so much better. He looks like an athlete. Or this guy's big, he can move, he knows what he's doing. Just whatever, man, all the above. Whether they don't like me or they do like me, I really don't care, as long as I make some kind of impression that people can kind of relate to, or they like, or dislike. I don't really care. Just make an impression, all that I'm trying to do.
But then you have something interesting where people are like, that's Cal Bishop from NXT. Do you want to kind of, would you say that you kind of have shed your time from NXT, and that's kind of, so I don't know, some wrestlers, when they leave WWE, they seem to just, their persona or their, I guess, time there kind of just follows them. Others just seem to shed it off very quickly. What do you, in your case, do you think you shed off being a former WWE guy, or do you think it's kind of just still follows you?
I think it depends, because if it was one of those scenarios where, like, you take someone like CJ Parker, who's now Juice Robinson, he was doing that character, and then some people did see him make that huge change when he went to Japan, and I think he shed that image. But some guys just haven't done it, and then some guys, they made their name with their character, and they just kept it as they're in the independent scene. I never got to that status of having a character or persona in NXT, just because I had hit with a shoulder injury. So other than I've kept the name Cal, I don't really think I kind of have that issue. The only thing was I got hurt. I was on a show, Breaking Ground. I was unfortunately released on that show. And the only thing that kind of stuck with me on that was the man who was in charge of talent relations just said maybe he's just not tough enough to handle this business. That is something that I want to shake, because I disagree 100% with that. So that's the only thing from developmental that sticks with me that I want to shake. Anybody else who has an opinion, I really don't care. That's the one thing. It's like, are you fucking serious? Not fucking tough enough? You don't fucking know me. That's the one thing that gets me the most.
I totally forgot about. I remember I did see that Breaking Ground episode. I totally had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, was that when you saw that? Or when you heard that? That had to be a motivation factor to be like, just kind of be like, are you're calling me an NCAA athlete not tough? Fuck you! I'm gonna show you that I'm tough. I'm gonna make the world my own. I'm gonna.
And that was the main reason why I was like, I want to do Bloodsport, because to me it's the toughest. You're gonna put the toughest guys in this, event. So it's like you can't say anyone who and everybody in Bloodsport's a tough son of a bitch. I don't care what anyone says. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I want to do this because I know I can hang, I know I can bang, and this is the best event to show that. So that was one of the main reasons why, like, put me in fucking Bloodsport, I'll show you how fucking tough I am. And that was the thing that always kept, that will forever stick with me. And I'm sure he didn't mean it when he said it that way, but it's just, that's always gonna be there forever, because he said on video, and that's there forever. Mm-hmm. So, that's the one thing that stays with me forever, no matter what. Oh no,
Bloodsport. If you get invited to compete on Bloodsport, like I said before, it is not everybody. It's kind of like joining the Skull and Bones in Yale. Not everybody gets to join Skull and Bones in Yale. Everybody gets, the people who get invited to Bloodsport. They're part of a unique group, a unique family that Absolutely. Not every other indie wrestler can or should be a part of. Quite honestly.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious to know. I know that whole week there's a collective going on. Are you going to be wrestling on any other shows that week, or are you just doing Bloodsport as of now?
I think I haven't gotten any word or anything. I'm showing up the night before, so I don't think I'm going to be able to do anything else, which is fine. Because to be honest, the only thing I kind of just want to do is just Bloodsport. So no, I don't think I'll be doing anything else. That's the only event I'm going to be doing. But it is very cool how I really am impressed with GCW and how they've been able to stay active during this whole pandemic. And they have so many really cool events going on that weekend in the fairgrounds in Indianapolis. So, I mean, part of me really wishes I could have came there early just to catch some of the other shows. Mm-hmm. I have a couple of friends that are performing in the other stuff, so it would be really fun to watch them. But no, I got to tip my hat to GCW. It's amazing that these guys have been able to stay so active and working during this.
Yeah, I think the show is also outdoors. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Have you ever wrestled outdoors before?
Many, many times. I've done many outdoor shows. I've done many flea markets. I've done plenty of stuff like that.
But just I'm sure it's pretty obvious, but I just want to hear from you. Differences between positive and negative differences between wrestling outdoors and indoors.
That's a good question. So let's say we're wrestling outdoors, but it's during the summer. It's like 100 degrees. The canvas could be whatever kind. If they don't have like a carpet style canvas, like let's say they just have like the I don't know how to explain it, but let's just say they have a different type of canvas that doesn't exactly do well with heat. I mean,
basically, if it's more tarp than carpet, then there's a problem.
Then there's a big problem. That would suck. But really, I don't think there's much of a difference. If you're wrestling, like for instance, this show starts at 8, so we're going to be outside. We're probably going to have some kind of spotlight and stuff. I don't think it's going to feel too much different if we're in a dimly lit building with people, so I don't really feel there's too much of a difference,
Yeah, I was about to say, it is October in Indiana. Could sometimes get a little bit hot in Indiana outside, but it's going to be at nighttime. October should be okay. Shouldn't be like.
Well, it could probably be like 60 something degrees. I can't imagine it be super duper hot.
Okay. And as GCW saying,
probably going to get colder because it's in the Midwest after all. It's probably going to get colder.
Yeah.
Has GCW said anything about like just any protocols that are going to be going on for the show? I've heard what for fans. They're gonna have like seats separated, masks, and all that stuff. I don't know. Have they said anything to you guys? I don't know, testing wise or anything of that sort?
I'm not sure. I'm just going to assume that, being in California, at the gym I go to work out at, we get our temperature checked. You have to wear a mask, and you do have to keep at least 6 feet distance from whoever. I'm going to assume it's going to be the same thing. I've been kind of focusing on the protocols they've been making at like AEW and WWE. I assume it's going to be similar to what GCW is going to have us do.
Gotcha. And I'm just curious, do you have any other shows coming up after this Bloodsport show?
Not really. No, this is kind of the only thing. So it'd be great if I do well enough to get invited to do some other stuff. But the thing is, here in California, they're not going to do any shows, especially in NorCal. So like I said earlier, I'm moving to Las Vegas after Bloodsport, just because there's more to do in Las Vegas compared to where I live in the Bay Area of California. So I'm sure there's going to be tons of stuff I'm going to do. There's a couple good little pro wrestling schools in Las Vegas. So it's going to be fun to go there and kind of see what they're going to do. And it's cheaper to fly out of Las Vegas than it is NorCal. So if anything comes up, we'll see. Right now, my only thing I kind of care about is just doing Bloodsport. Afterwards, we'll see. I don't know.
And also cheaper to live in Vegas.
It's funny you say that it's cheaper to fly. It's funny that you say it's cheaper to fly out of Vegas, because that's normally like a tourist trap, so to speak, because they normally get you to pay more and more to go out there.
Sure.
It's also cheaper to live in Vegas. I believe they have no state tax, if that's correct.
There is no state income. No.
Christian, do you have any last questions for our guest before we sign out?
Actually, I got a few questions to ask, a few more questions to ask. First of all, we haven't touched on this, but outside of training and competing in professional wrestling or in amateur wrestling, what is it that you like to do for fun?
Where I live in NorCal, hiking's something that I do a lot. And also I have family that live in Lake Tahoe. So I spend a lot of time kayaking, fishing. Those are kind of the main things that I do a lot for fun. And, there's tons of places to hike, and just be outside is kind of my main MO. So those are definitely things that I like to do. I'm not much of a hunter, but I do love to fish. Fishing's something that I really enjoy, and I love to go on hiking. My family's big on hiking.
Okay, understood. Another question I want to ask is, if you weren't involved in wrestling, be it amateur or professional, mat or entertainment based, what would be basically your plan B, aside from potentially having a mixed martial arts career? But if that doesn't work, what would be your plan B? What would be your fallback plan?
I'd just be a teacher. I would teach. I would love to teach, work with special ed. That's been something I've been thinking about for a long time. And I got my degree at Oregon State for human development, family science. So it would either be work for, teach and work with people with special needs, or be a guidance counselor. So either one of those two.
And you know what? I probably wouldn't mind, a lot of people going into working with special education folks, because a lot of people think, they're just misunderstood, or they have problems that can't be solved. All you got to do is teach them the right way, and, reach out to them, reach out to their parents, and make sure that, that child gets taught to the point where, hey, this person can be taught.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, kids that are maybe I shouldn't say special needs, but let's say like resource. A lot of kids in resource are just kids that just have the opportunity or the avenues to get the proper education or learning because they've had some incidents at home. They're just in a problematic lifestyle. So they're just in that scenario because of all the distractions they're facing. And that would be something I would love to work on is, you know, if instead I'm done, if I wouldn't do pro wrestling, that would be something that I would focus on, is like working on those avenues to help a kid who may just be in a bad scenario.
I see. Now, considering the fact, I don't know if Erik is still active on social media. He probably ain't, considering the fact that it's been over a year since he last competed. But if there was anything that you would like to say to him or about him, in case he ever listens to this interview, I mean, what would you basically say to him as if you were talking to him right in his face?
I would say, that's a good question. You know, to be honest, if Erik and I, when we square up and stuff, words don't mean nothing. I would rather just let my actions speak for it. So I wouldn't say anything. Just wrestle and throw them around.
Understood. I mean, it's the best way to do that instead of trying to hype up the fight by, you know, just talking. I mean, no disrespect to your former teammate Colby Covington, but it'd be much better to fight it out rather than just, you know, try and embarrass yourself on the microphone.
Well, I feel like with Colby, he wasn't getting the attention that he felt he deserved. So him speaking out was a way for him to get noticed. So that's, like I said, that's his preference and his prerogative. And he had a little pro wrestling influence. So I can't do much for it.
As Josh Barnett said, pro wrestling is strong, or pro wrestling is alive. I forgot the exact quote, but something along those lines. But with that being said, Kal Jak, I want to also give you...
And one more thing, Andrew. One more thing I want to ask Mr. Kal Jak is that we kind of touched on this earlier. What can people hope to expect out of you in Bloodsport? But, you know, for fans who may probably be seeing you for the first time, or for fans who probably don't even know at all about you, what would be the main thing you would say to them in order to get people interested in you in the months and years to come?
I'm the only Division I All-American wrestler in the independent scene. I'm the only 4-time NCAA qualifier. I'm the only 2-time Pac-12 champion, and I am the best ass kicker in the independent scene. That's what they should know.
Okay, fair enough. Andrew, take us out.
Oh, yeah. I want to give you an opportunity, Kal Jak, plug all of your social media. If you got pro wrestling T-stores where people can book you, anyone you want to give a shout out to, the floor is yours.
Yeah, you can check out all my shirts at prowrestlingtees.com/Kaljak, spelled Kaljak. There's no C's in my name because I'm not average. C's are average. You can catch me on Twitter at same thing, KL_JAK. No C's. We're not average people. No C's. And I had an Instagram, but you know what? I deleted that shit. I don't like Instagram. So just follow me on Twitter.
Why did you delete Instagram? What did you hate about it? There's so much stuff to hate about it, but I want to hear why.
I feel like people use it too much to get instant gratification, and I just don't really care anymore. You know, especially in a time where there's not a whole lot going on except for the world is upside down. So I just kind of got sick of it. And I'm tired of seeing people post TikTok videos on Instagram. So I'm like, I'm done with this thing.
I don't know if you have any children or if you plan to have any children if you don't, but keep away from the TikTok. That's all. That's all. Yeah.
I substitute teach, man, and I see kids doing those stupid dances in the classroom, and I'm just like, stop. No more stupid TikTok. I don't like it. It's dumb. It's not good. I hate it. I have a niece, and I have a niece on the way. I hope to God, I know my sister's not going to put them on TikTok, so they're not going to use that shit.
Okay. The other thing I want to ask is, I know we were talking about it through Facebook Messenger. For tonight's UFC show, Izzy or Costa? Who do you have?
Izzy.
And why is that? Why do you think Izzy's going to win?
Izzy is a counter fighter. Costa's too straightforward. He's durable as hell, but I feel like depending on how he reacts with the weight cut, he looks like he shrunk I think they cut out how much, because he was like 220 at one point, Costa was. He just looks smaller than he has previously. Like, if you look at how he looked against Yoel Romero, he looks so much bigger. I mean, we'll see with how he looks tonight. I'm really curious. But I like Izzy. But the thing is, like, you watch Izzy versus Yoel. Yoel is an old man. He played him. Wasn't going to do shit because he doesn't care. He's already got millions of dollars with that lawsuit. So it's not like he has anything to prove. So Izzy just didn't have a great performance. I think he favors aggressive guys, man. He's a good counter fighter. So I'm going to say Izzy. You could ask me anybody on that whole card. I'll have an opinion who's going to win, who's going to lose.
Diego Sanchez.
I'm always going to cheer for him. You start the yes movement.
True. Actually, if it does wind up happening, will you watch Conor versus Pac-Man if it happens?
If it happens,
Yeah.
who isn't going to? Of course I'm going to watch that. I would rather see Conor fight. I'd rather see him take on Masvidal or finish that trilogy with Diaz. But I don't know. I don't think he really – I mean, we'll see. I don't really – I'd rather see him fight. I don't want – because he had such a good outing against Cowboy Cerrone. I mean, Cowboy was pissing down his leg.
Yeah.
So I'd rather see him. I'd rather see him fight. I don't really care for him to box because –
and fuck it, since we have you on here, I'm just going to ask you anyway. Gaethje versus Khabib. One guy who's an NCAA wrestler who never wrestles versus a guy who was an NCAA wrestler who wrestles all the time. What do you think about that matchup?
I don't know, man. Here's the thing. Like, look at T. Woodley. T. Woodley was an All-American wrestler. He has horrible defense against wrestlers. I've never seen Gaethje have anyone attack him in that sense. Khabib's a Sambo wrestler out of Dagestan. I don't know how that's going to go. I mean, those guys are different breeds. And I was looking at brackets, and I saw that one of my college teammates beat Gaethje my junior year. So I thought that was interesting. My teammate Scott Sakaguchi beat Justin Gaethje. I don't know, man. Gaethje's got some power, but that's a real technical fight. But Gaethje looks so damn good against Tony Ferguson, man. Just powered through him. And Khabib doesn't have a lot of. I feel like if Gaethje has good defense, and he just powers through and just knows how to stop those takedowns, because Khabib gets his takedowns off the fence. He'll shoot on you. He'll drive you towards the fence, and then that's where he does all his damage. If Gaethje knows how to defend that, he should be fine.
Do you think that Gaethje could knock out Khabib?
And one more question. Huh?
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna ask, do you think that Gaethje has the power to knock out Khabib?
I don't know. I don't know how. I've never. Who was it? Khabib fought someone that kind of startled him. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was Poirier. But I don't know, man. I've never seen him wobble super bad. So, I mean, we'll see. I don't know. Who knows? Gaethje does have some power in his hands. We'll see.
Sorry, Christian.
You know what? Come to think of it, one more question I got. You mentioned Tik Tok, and obviously we mentioned Conor versus Pac-Man. But the one question I do have is, what are your thoughts about, YouTubers trying to – actually, no. Let me go ahead and rephrase that question. What are your thoughts about viral stars, about social media stars looking to get into combat sports just to make a quick payday and just do nothing, so to speak? Guys like Logan Paul and KSI.
Okay, so here's the deal. Logan Paul had more viewership in that boxing fight than Canelo and what's his name the next night. So, I mean, shit, dude, we're in the era of
Canelo versus Kovalev.
Yeah, exactly. So it really, man, it's a popularity contest, and so many kids and people attach themselves to Logan Paul, the Low Gang, or all those guys. So, hey, you know what? To each his own. Give props to Logan Paul because he did wrestle amateur in Ohio, and he took like he is a state placer. I mean, that's not my avenue. It's not my prerogative. So influencers can do what the hell they want. That's not really my thing, but I am familiar with it. So it kind of is what it is, man. It's just kind of the world we live in.
Mm-hmm. The unfortunate.
Understood.
The unfortunate.
Andrew, go ahead and finish us off.
Okay, great. For all those who want to watch Kal Jak take on Erik Hammer at Bloodsport, it'll be available on FITE TV. It'll be October 11th, 8 p.m. it starts, and you can download the FITE TV app.
That's 8 p.m. Eastern. That's 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, by the way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it'll be, I guess it's also 7 Central for your time, right? No, it's going to be, wait, what time is it?
Mm-hmm.
Central? Yeah. And
yeah, it should be Central in Indiana. Yeah. So, yeah, 7.
And you can download the FITE TV app or do it through the on your PC, laptop, whatever you got. But it's going to be a great show. I'm really looking forward to the match you're going to have with Erik Hammer. It's going to be 2 big guys brawling and trying to choke each other out. I feel like that's what the match is going to be like. And listen, we don't see a lot of heavyweights guys go for submissions, so I'm really looking forward to this matchup.
Should be fun.
Oh, yes. And again, thank you so much, Kal Jak, for talking to us. We look forward to the match, and best of luck. Best of luck. We hope to see you doing more wrestling stuff again the rest of this year.
Cool. Thank you guys for having me.
No problem. You take care, sir.
You too.
No problem.